How many words do you know? Answering that question could be a little difficult. First, you'd have to decide what you mean by a word, and then you'd have to decide what you mean by knowing a word. So in answering the question, how many words do you know? The first problem we run into is identifying what a word is. Do idioms count as words? An idiom is usually made up of different words, but the whole is not always the sum of its parts. Raining cats and dogs does not mean that cats and dogs were falling from the sky. Sometimes words exist only as parts of idioms. You may have heard the idiom kith and kin, but you probably have never used the word kith outside of that idiom. Finally, you can't break them apart so easily. Saying devil should care instead of devil may care doesn't work. The idiom devil may care means something like reckless. It doesn't literally refer to the devil caring. Saying you hit the nail on the top of it sounds wrong. The idiom is you hit the nail on the head. That we can't break them up so easily makes them kind of like words in that way. So if idioms have different meanings, are unique, and cannot easily be changed, does knowing them count as knowing a word? How about phrasal verbs? Do they count as new words? Phrasal verbs usually consist of a verb plus a preposition, such as get up or get down, or make up or make out. You can find dozens of them in dictionary entries under some verbs. Their meaning, however, like idioms, is not the sum of its parts. When you ask someone, "What time do you get up?" you wouldn't be asking when they next intend to stand, but "What time do you wake up?" There's really nothing in make plus out that means kiss. A language learner can't always make sense of this without learning phrasal verbs as new words. Take a good dictionary in hand and look at the entry for get. You'll find a number of phrasal verbs under it, such as get up, get on with, get around, get out, get back. All of them have a bit of a different meaning than get plus a preposition. Do we count abbreviations as words, like FBI or CIA? Do we consider those to be words? If we consider an acronym like SCUBA to be a word, would we also consider an abbreviation like CIA to be a word? Are proper names words? The names for cities and countries are often different in different languages. Would they not count as words then? Is Paris a different word than Paris? Is Italy a different word than Italia? Are Pedro and Pierre not words in other languages for Peter? So are proper names considered words in counting your vocabulary? What about words like Web 2.0 with numbers built into them? Is that one word or two? What about technical or scientific terms? Would you consider these to be words, even if they're extremely uncommon and unknown by anyone outside of that particular field? What about slang? Does slang count? So before you could actually calculate your vocabulary, you'd have to decide what a word is. We'd also have to decide whether we're only counting head words. If you knew the word determine, and all of these other words derive from the word determine, for example, determined, undetermined, determination, determining, determiner, determinative, would that count as knowing one word or knowing 7? This brings us to a related question. How many words are there in the English language? And the answer there really depends on what you count as a word. And there's no sensible answer to the question until you figure out what the answer to that question is. But the answer to the question, How many words are there in the English language? There's easily over 1,000,000 words in the English language. Furthermore, we need to decide what counts as knowing a word. I was reading a book and came across the word recalcitrant. And I'd heard the word before. I understood it in context. I don't know if I could have defined it, and I don't think I've ever used it except when using it as an example of a word that I'd heard and understood but didn't use. Recalcitrant really isn't a very common word, though. Looking at a corpus of over 3 million words on lextutor.ca, it only came up in 3 example sentences. I invite you to go procrastinate now at lextutor.ca. We can divide any person's lexicon into 2 parts, the passive and the active vocabulary. Active vocabulary includes those lexemes used in speech or writing, and the passive vocabulary includes the lexemes known but not used. So recalcitrant would have belonged to my passive vocabulary. One study, which was done with only 3 English speakers, a secretary, a businesswoman, and a lecturer, shows large differences in their vocabulary size. The study found that the secretary's passive vocabulary was 38,500. The businesswoman's passive vocabulary was 73,350. The lecturer's passive vocabulary was 56,250. And we can see fairly significant differences here. The lecturer knows almost twice as many words as the secretary and uses just a little less than twice as many words as the secretary in her active vocabulary. We said that there may be 1,000,000 words in the English language, and even the British lecturer only speaks 76,250 of them. That doesn't seem like much, but you can get by on a lot less. You can get by on a passive vocabulary of 3,000 to 5,000 words and an active vocabulary of 2,000 to 3,000 words.